my deepest experience as adolescent was to be a naval officer. So as naval officer, you're trained to be quick, efficient, strong, and to win. And you're frightened of any form of weakness or vulnerability, or weakness in the enemy, yes, but not in our own weakness. And then I left the Navy to follow Jesus, and I had the impression when I left the Navy that to be a Christian was to live with the poor. And I nearly entered a community in Harlem, New York, which was a small community right in the heart of the troubled area. But I didn't do that, and I did studies and so on. And then I discovered, coming back to France after having taught in the University of Toronto, I discovered the world of people with disabilities. I found them in psychiatric hospitals, I found them in institutions, and they were in very bad conditions, a lot of violence, and particularly I visited one institution where there was a lot of violence. There were 80 men with disabilities, and they had no work, 2 dormitories, 40 beds, with nothing. And I was shocked. And as a disciple of Jesus, what to do? I didn't feel at all to enter there. The only thing I could do was maybe welcome 1 or 2. So that's what I did, after arranging things, legal questions and so on. And welcomed 2 men. One was Raphael, who had had a meningitis, could hardly speak, and his body very fragile, he could fall easily. We were the same age then, 36. And there was Philippe, who had had an encephalitis, 1 arm paralyzed, 1 leg paralyzed. He talked a lot, and we began living together. For them it was freedom to come from a very closed institution where there was violence, and to living in a little house in a village, and we would go and buy food, and there's a very interesting word, commandment of Jesus, which is really the center of life. When you give a meal, don't invite the members of your family, don't invite your rich neighbors, don't invite your friends. But when you give a really good meal, invite the poor, the lame, the disabled, and the blind. And at the time of Jesus, those people were the beggars. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says, if you do that, you will be blessed. Jesus doesn't say, they will be blessed because they'll have a good meal. But to eat together is to become a friend. That's why Aristotle says, to become a friend, you must eat a lot of salt together. That's a lot of meals. Because as you sit down, you talk and you share. And then you discover that the person that is the most rejected in the streets, he is the one you discover that he's beautiful. You have the same story with St. Francis of Assisi, when he met the leper. The leper was at the bottom of society, and he went to live with them, and he was changed. So it's to discover, my own experience was that living with Raphael and Philippe was a beautiful experience. We had lots of fun together, because they had no family, just the institution, and somewhere I was living a sort of adoption, not really, but a sort of adoption. And they were so happy, and I was too, because somewhere I found my earth, my home, and my home was to live with them and to have fun, because they would blossom up in laughter. That didn't mean to say that now and again we had difficulties, and so on. But essentially they discovered that they were loved, that somebody cared for them. And of course they had not been loved. Their family didn't want them like that. They were put in an institution and so on. So there was a revelation for them that they were beautiful. Because when you welcome someone, it's to reveal to them, you are beautiful, you are precious. One of my leaders of L'Arche, before coming to L'Arche, worked in the world of prostitution. And one day she came into the park of Sydney where there was prostitution, and she saw a young man dying of an overdose. She had followed him a bit. She took him in his arms, and his last words were, "You've always wanted to change me, you never wanted to meet me." We like changing people because that's power. I can evangelize, I can do good, but to meet is something else. It's to take time. Tell me your story. Who are you? And that takes time. And it's a very personal question. Take time. Well, in L'Arche it was easy because there were just 3 of us and a friend, and then others came. But at the meal, we took time. And then we went to buy the food, we ate the food, we washed up, we started preparing the next meal. So we were living together. And for them who had so often been considered as idiots, handicapped, no good, they were discovering that they were someone and that they were precious. So the experience of mercy was a beautiful experience. That doesn't mean to say we hadn't had problems. Like we welcomed one woman who had was hemiplegic, one arm, one leg paralyzed, but she had extreme violence. As we asked our psychiatrist, how to live with Pauline, and he said, she has lived 40 years of humiliation. The parents didn't want a woman like that, a girl like that. At school they were laughed at, in the streets, and so she hated her body. So our psychiatrist said, her violence is a cry. Does anyone want me? Does anyone love me? So that takes time. Time for her to drop the violence, because she didn't know who we were. Raphael and Philip, it was great. But for her, it took many years for the violence to subside, so she could discover, I'm happy to live with you.